All right, good afternoon, everyone. Are we okay, Jesus? We're good. Uh, Today is March 21st, 2023. This is the time and place scheduled for the Nevada Gaming Control Board's industry workshop regarding the board's technology division. First of all, thank you all for being here today on a rainy Tuesday. Very impressed with the turnout because we know this is an important issue to all of you, your industry in Nevada, and we know that there's a lot more people watching on the Zoom YouTube telecast, so we welcome them as well. Madam Secretary, if you can hear me, has today's workshop been posted in accordance with Nevada's open meeting law?
Yes, it has.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Let's begin with the first public comments section.
This item is placed on the agenda to give the public an opportunity to comment on gaming-related matters. Anyone wishing to address the board may do so at this time. Comments by each person are limited to 3 minutes as a reasonable time, place, and manner restriction. If board members ask questions of the speaker, the time needed to address those questions will not count against the speaker's 3-minute time period. If speakers have any handouts or written copies of verbal comments to provide for the record, please hand them to the enforcement agent seated to your left in Las Vegas or seated behind you in Carson City.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Pursuant to state open meeting law, matters brought to the board's attention during public comment cannot be acted upon today, but we are happy to hear comments from the public as well as members of the board themselves. So during this public comment section, if anyone would like to come forward, please do so at this time and state your name and spell your name for the record. Let's go first to Carson City. Do we have anyone in Carson City, Madam Secretary?
We do not.
Probably the weather. All right. How about here in Las Vegas? Anyone wishing to make public comment? Yes, sir. Step forward, have a seat, and state your name, spell your name for the record. Which, by the way, we don't have a court reporter for this hearing, but it is being audio recorded for the open meeting law. So spelling your name will also help in case we later need to have it transcribed. Is the green button on there? Is it green?
It's lit green.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you'll mute me before the end, but that's okay. My name is John Akers, A-C-R-E-S. I'm the CEO of Acres 4.0, a licensed manufacturer here in Nevada. And we've got a handout to cover a lot of the material we're putting into the written record. And Troy will put it over here on the table for anybody that wants it. I presume that's the procedure. Is that correct?
Sure, that'll be fine.
Great. Thank you. So I came to Nevada, it'll be 51 years, June the 15th.
Mr. Akers, let me stop you a second.
Uh-huh.
If you want to speak during the actual workshop, you'll have a lot longer than 3 minutes to do that. This is just the public comment section, which we do limit to 3 minutes. So if you want to save that, you can do it now.
I will
but if you're going to go past 3 minutes, then we'll stop. Okay, perfect. And we'll save that for when we get past public comment.
I'm muted in 60 seconds.
I beat you. Perfect. Thank you. Anybody else wishing to make public comment here in Las Vegas today? Seeing none, we will close the public comments section and move on into, we have one item of business today, and it's described on the agenda as gaming technology process modernization. And that's how broad we want it to be today. It needs to be focused as on the agenda regarding the technology division, but it doesn't have to be down to the lab. What we're really looking for is an open discussion today. And that's why you'll see that the board members today agreed with me to sit down here in the well. We didn't want to be up on the dais. We really want this to be a discussion. My envision this plan to be today is actually a town hall type of meeting where we would pass a mic around, actually have a conversation with you. Unfortunately, the audio visual requirements, the open meeting law, make us record this meeting, and we're also having it videotaped. And so if we don't do that, we end up with everybody not being on camera. So with that said, we still want the town hall type of feel. As I mentioned, we don't have a court reporter. The idea there was in case we had two people talking over each other, it wouldn't have been a problem. Still a little bit of problem for the audio visual if we have to come back and transcribe the meeting later. But the idea is it's an experiment, us not being up on the dais, us trying to have an open conversation with all of you. We also have today here Chief Barbie that I want to acknowledge from the technology division, Chief Caruso from the Attorney General's office. Other chiefs are here with us as well, Langsavath, Torkerson, and Fremont. We're hoping that they will be also part of the discussion if needed, but the idea here is We want to focus on future. If you need to bring up past analogies, past anecdotes, that's fine to set the background story. But what we're really hoping to get out of this meeting today is the chance that you can tell us from the industry side what is not being done that could speed up the process. Future specific concrete examples that we can walk away with. Brought a whiteboard up in here. My handwriting's terrible, but we might get to the point where we want to talk about reg changes. There's things that, okay, if we're going to fix that, we're going to have to change a reg. If we're going to fix that, we're going to probably have to change a statute. And then I hope that the biggest column of that will be, we don't have to change or a reg or a statute. We should be able to maybe change the way we do a technical standard, maybe the way that we just do a process, maybe the way that the chair can say we can speed up administrative approvals. So that's what we're hoping to achieve today. The board members and myself will be asking questions, again, in a discussion format. We will probably also look over to Chief Barbie for explanation. Member Watkins has been here for quite a while. The judge and myself have been here for, I think, about 7 weeks. So we're on a rapid learning curve. All of your knowledge is probably way past us. So we'll be asking you questions. Just looking for honesty, just looking for what can we all do better. And with that, I'll be happy to, like I said, no topics off a discussion. So there's no format, there's no order. Don't feel bad if the last topic is different from your topic. It's all about the technology division. So with that, Mr. Akers, if you want to go first, feel free, step up.
Do I spell my name again?
Nope,
Okay.
I think we got it.
All right, thank you. I came to Nevada almost 51 years ago, 1972. I was 18. I had got a chance to what I now know was illegally to work in a casino. I always liked electronics and electrical things, so I started working on slot machines down at a little place called Mr. Size Casino, across the street from the Stardust, but behind a gas station. And we did incredible business there. And what my boss always taught me to think about is not the technology itself, but how the technology makes the player feel. What's the experience that occurs between their ears? I learned then, and I've practiced it all this time, that if I dress down, as I'm quite capable of doing these days, I can always crawl underneath the slot machine, and I can sit down next to a player and engage in a great conversation with them. What I learned in my early times was how important gambling is to so many people. There's all the publicity, rightfully so, about people that are addicted or that spend too much, and that's a problem we'll have to address. But we cannot lose sight of the fact that we offer an incredible, powerful entertainment, something that helps people rethink their lives as they win and they lose in the moment. And I've seen people of every class and capability enjoying the act of gambling. We were fortunate enough, I was fortunate enough to be here at a time of rapid growth from 1972 until probably 2006. The growth in Nevada was unbelievable. Everybody knows that. But also we saw the growth be so good in Nevada that other states said, hey, we can do that too. The very thing that was considered to be immoral, illegal, and objectionable became desirable because of Nevada's leadership. Because of the things that Nevada did to make gambling relatively safe and relatively honest in comparison to how it had ever been done before, recast the industry. And today, Americans spend something in the range of $100 billion a year on legalized gambling. Unfortunately, they probably still spend more than that on illegal gambling, but it's we have this industry that is so important to me. But what bothers me is to watch it start to shrink. That this year, like 3 weeks ago, we had the announcement that 2022 was another record gambling revenue year. And it's absolutely true. The numbers reported, I think in the range of $14 billion, were the highest numbers ever recorded. But when you adjust it for the good old inflation, the year 2006 was 20% higher than 2022. 2022 was only the 11th best of the last 20 years in gambling. That we see people coming to town gambling less. We see the innovation that our resorts, not our casinos, but our resorts are doing in sports and food and Taylor Swift, all the things that draw people in. Those people come in and do their entertainment and go home without gambling because our gambling technology has not kept pace with their desires. Or they can gamble at home more conveniently because there's casinos close to their homes. We have to address both problems. The problem that we need to really think about, though, is that someone born, say, around 1975 and later likely grew up with a video game and a home computer. Their expectation of entertainment is very, very different than my father's generation. He grew up in a depression listening to radio. I grew up watching 3 stations of television. We were used to passive entertainment. Our generations found slot machines and table games to be quite satisfying, and video poker was incredibly exciting. Today, the people that are now reaching the prime gambling age in their 40s and 50s aren't so enthused. And we've not been able to adapt our games because regulations restrict our ability to experiment with new ideas, with new ways of accommodating a player's desires, and new ways of achieving that experience that they must have between their ears. Nevada is highly dependent on gambling tax revenue. It's good for Nevada to increase gambling revenues. It's good for the industry to increase gambling revenues, and it's good for employment. What we're asking for is an opportunity to rethink the regulations and the way those regulations are implemented to allow innovators to quickly iterate. By iterate, I mean, well, let's back up. I consider myself an inventor and an innovator. Inventing is the first little piece. You get an idea. That's really the easy part. The hard part is translating that idea into a commercial success. And with the way things are now, we have to try to create that commercial success before we ever set foot in a casino with the product. We've got to get the product approved and refined before we go to the casino. But I can tell you, at least from my experience, every product I put out falls apart the moment the second player touches it. They do things I never imagined they would do, falls apart. I want to make a change, and I can't because it's regulated. It maybe took me 9, 12 months to get my idea into that field trial in the first place. Now we go in and turn it on, and we got to wait 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks before we can make the change that's required to accommodate the problem that we found.
Pardon me for interrupting you, but that's exactly what I personally want to hear today. So tell me about that. So you put it out there, somebody breaks it. What's stopping you for 6, 8 weeks?
Unlike when I arrived, when the electricity was just hitting all the slot machines, today all of our games and systems are computerized. All of our code is signatured and approved for deployment. And you can't change a single line of that computer code without getting a new approval to deploy that signature in the casino. So even if we did a video poker analyzer over at Resorts World here a couple months ago, we tested it as best we could. We tested it at BMM, we tested it at our offices. We go into the casino, and the machines they have are a slightly different model than what we had to test with. And we don't work. We can't get the information we need. Take 10 minutes to fix that problem. Has no effect on revenue or game behavior or anything. It's just a way to collect data. But we could not affect that change until we submitted the change to the lab and awaited their approval. That approval took 6 weeks. For me to develop a good product, I usually have to iterate a dozen times more. If I have to wait 6 weeks between every iteration, I can't get there.
And what were you told was the reason why the reiteration, you're talking about the signature, hadn't been modified? Why did you have to send that back?
Because the rule of deployment said that I could only deploy this specific
Signature was
instance of
approved.
software.
Right.
It had to be approved. And we understand that there's validity and reasons for that. What we would love to see, though, is there a way that we could use the fact that we've, as a manufacturer, have already met certain tests, we've already been investigated, that we could use our licensing authority and put our licensing at risk by self-validating that these changes that we're making are okay, at least for the period of the field trial. A field trial is where you get to put your device into one casino for testing. What we would love to do is to be able to go into that single casino with their permission and the state's knowledge, deploy our product, make changes as we need, certify that we promise those changes are within the scope of the regulations. And indeed, the change that we submitted to the lab did not require any modifications at all from what we submitted.
And are you talking about just during the field trial versus something that's out in the industry for 6 months or 6 years? The reason why I ask that is if you change something and the signature is different, and correct me if I'm wrong, because a lot of this is over my head, then if we go to check it from an enforcement angle, it doesn't match. So you're talking about just during the field trial?
Just during the field
Yeah,
trial
okay.
for that one instance. Then whatever regulatory approvals that you all decide are required, and I think there could be some changes in that, could be applied before the product is commercially deployed. So we would have a chance to go in and iterate, develop our product, make it work. Half the time, even say, you know what, this product doesn't measure up to commercial success, just forget about it. We'll just withdraw it.
So do you like the process of a field trial? Because I've heard, and I'm not speaking for anybody here, there's certain faction of the industry who doesn't believe we need field trials. Do you think if you had more authority to make changes during a field trial that they're worthwhile?
I think that our ideas for field trial are not incompatible with those people that would like to skip the field trial. For the people that are developing the next iteration of a game where it's changing in color or theme, I think they make a very great point about why should we have to field trial this again? Let's just go to the market. And indeed, they're able to do that in other jurisdictions without any real problems being shown. But we'd also like to see the field trial as the opportunity for the innovator to do their early work with live players in a live environment, because frankly, we can never, ever reproduce that in a lab.
So back to my earlier comment about I'd like to create a list that would require us to look at regulations, which is another, we'd have a reg workshop, we'd dig into it. There's this group that might require statutory changes. Where do you think, for what you're asking for, to have more approval during a field trial process without going back to an ITL, where would that fit?
As I understand, the changes that we are asking for could be approved by the chairman. And that would be it. I don't think that we're asking.
Conditions on the field trial.
Yes, condition on the field trial.
If these certain things require modification, you don't need to send back to the lab. It'd be a condition.
Right. We would love to be able to go in on a field trial without there being an extensive examination of how suitable this thing is. Unfortunately, as time has gone on, we've become a precedent-oriented approval process. Well, look back here 5 years and we denied something similar because of this. So therefore, you're like, we had a different technology we call SaaS sharing. Don't worry about what that means. But we were able to deploy it in other states with great efficiency very quickly. Here in Nevada, it took 14 months to gain the ability to deploy that, even though we didn't change a single thing in how we did it, but because they were legitimately concerned about matching up with precedent. I don't think that this is a problem of personnel. I think this is a problem of direction. I think this is a problem of adapting the rules that were developed over the last 30 years with older technology to the reality of the new world. Everything is way more complicated than it used to be. There's multiple computers and it's this and that and the other. There's lots of opportunities for misfires, almost none of which are discovered during the lab testing that we could fix more efficiently ourselves.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you.
Then there's one more thing that
Please.
I'd like to ask, and that is that had I not been able to engage in my casino work when I was 18 and 19 years old, I don't think I could have ever been nearly as effective. And I understand that there are reasons we must divide minors from gambling. But what I'm hoping for is that we can explore a way in which we could allow a very limited non-commercial licensing capability to our universities so that the students there, and I go and do a seminar with UNLV students every year, and there are people there that just desperately want to try their ideas out. They might be stupid, they might be wrong, but by trying them out, you learn. How can we take these bright minds, look at Apple and Microsoft and Google, and see that they were formed by college kids? And we don't allow somebody to think about our industry until they're past that age. It's a tremendous opportunity we're losing. I hope that together, I hope that we can create a partnership between the operators and the providers and the regulators that let us look for ways to make for better experiences for our players, safe experiences for our players, proper revenue reporting to the state, and increased revenue for everybody.
It's a very interesting idea, and personally, I'm very open to the idea. I would probably ask you to speak with AGM about that, see where the industry's at. I attended University of Nevada, Reno. I graduated from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. I love what they're doing out there with Blackfire, the incubator, and everything they're doing. So personally, for me, if we can get younger people involved in the future of gaming, I'm all for it. So that's one we probably need to have a public-private get together, separate meeting, and see if we can make something like that happen.
Well, thank you to the board for allowing us to have this. Just the fact that we're having this opportunity, this workshop, is an amazing advance for where we've been before. Again, I want to make sure that we're not coming across as criticizing any individual. We just think that we have an opportunity to re-examine our processes. Thank you.
Great, and that's the way it was received. And from anybody here, don't be afraid of saying something. That's the way we're receiving everything, is that we're all working toward making Nevada and Nevada's gaming industry better. So we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me get up here on the whiteboard with my bad handwriting. What you're asking about for potentially more conditions on field trials will, I don't believe, requires regulation either. So we might be able to put that in the good column. Anybody else who wants to speak, come on up, introduce yourself and spell your name for the record.
Good afternoon, Chair Hendrick, Member Watkins, Member Assad, Madam Secretary. For the record, my name is Darren Dorsey. I'm the Executive Director of the Association of Gaming Equipment Manufacturers, AGEM, which is our global gaming supplier industries trade association. I'd also note today that AGEM's outside counsel, Dan Reeser from Fenimore, is also here if there are any kind of technical questions, if we get into that a little later in the workshop. I would like to take the opportunity, just as you did mention that with Mr. Akers, AGEM has been there in the past to try to work through legislative ideas to change the gaming age. We did have the opportunity in the 2019 legislature to pass a bill that lowered the gaming age and registration component from 21 to 18 for certain opportunities, whether that's trade school or just people in that gap between 18 and 21. we want to be on the forefront of those to kind of make our education system, both from the primary education and secondary education level, that gaming and gaming technology is a great opportunity. So those are opportunities that we can continue to explore in the future. But I'm here today along with numerous industry colleagues, representatives of various AGEM member companies, and many others interested and engaged on the topic of today's workshop, and to be part of conversations on modernizing and improving how technology in Nevada is regulated. While Nevada's way of regulating gaming earned its prestige and leadership position for many, many decades, the approach to overseeing gaming technology, including that 2015 memo outlined in the workshop notice, has not kept up with some more advanced approaches that have been developed and adopted in most other state and tribal gaming regulatory authorities in the U.S. over these past couple of decades. Those jurisdictions adopted a product approval methodology that recognizes gaming technology as a national and global marketplace and sought to make their jurisdictions preferred venues for early and initial introductions to compete with Nevada for operators and customers. And during these same 2 decades, the number of slot machines and table products in North America alone, just outside Nevada, has seen double-digit percentage increases against that overall total. And that doesn't even account for things such as significant advancements in related systems, associated equipment, and other gaming technology. The result is that so many gaming products and innovations of all types, conceived, developed, produced, manufactured, managed, and delivered by Nevada licensees, from their substantial bases in this state, are first deployed, enhanced, improved, and utilized outside Nevada months and possibly years before being enjoyed by Nevada customers and gaming establishments. Our gaming technology industry believes that modernization of our approach to this testing, approval, and deployment of our approach to the testing, approval, and deployment of products, systems, associated equipment, and related innovations in Nevada can greatly benefit and improve Nevada's gaming marketplace. And since the board's asked for dialogue and thoughts on this topic today, we appreciate that. We're happy to be here and happy to provide some thoughts and maybe some possible examples on how to improve Nevada's process. The first one is a larger, maybe a macro item, which is Nevada's adoption of a collaboration, maybe versus bureaucratic approach to make Nevada the place where gaming products and innovations are first introduced. That was part of the discussion with Mr. Akers, and it's just kind of part of the reason that we're here today. Another would be fully adopting a framework where independent test laboratories, or ITLs, conduct any and all the necessary testing and certification for all products in Nevada. And a third thing, it was referenced briefly, a significant overhaul of Nevada's field trial processes so they conform with modern trends, where unnecessary and duplicative trials are eliminated, and any required ones provide clear, objective paths forward. These are just a few examples.
Let me stop you there. I apologize. Tell me how that could happen. The last example you just gave. What could we as a board change to speed that process up?
Well, I think that there would be, first and foremost, there would be an identification of a wide variety of items that where field trials are not even applicable to or necessary from. That could be products that have been deployed in another jurisdiction for a certain period of time before they're brought to Nevada. That product's in the field, it's deployed elsewhere. A field trial here may be duplicative, unnecessary, and maybe going over a path that maybe is not necessary. While at the same time, if it's an innovative product, first time it's been put to market anywhere, to get some taste testing because it can't be replicated in a test or a test environment, it needs to be put out in the field at a small location so you can, I hate to use that term, but beat it up and see how it works in a real world live environment.
How would we as a board track those that don't need full field trials because they've been field trialed in other jurisdictions? How would the industry come to us, and how would our lab know the difference? I mean, in real world examples, how could we keep track of that?
Well, I think you could also make it just an affirmative reporting process every 30 days, every 60 days on these kinds of products, because every manufacturer of all size and scale, they're putting these products out, not just in Nevada, but in all regulated jurisdictions, whether in the US and globally. So it's a matter of from an auditing or an accounting type process where we're telling you, the regulator, where all those products are, where they stand, and where they're at on a monthly, quarterly, or semi-annual basis.
What if, and other board members, feel free to jump in. I don't want to dominate this, and you don't have to ask for approval. It's just a conversation. What if it was deployed in 28 other jurisdictions, but they didn't require the same kind of statutory or regulatory reporting we have to have. I'm hearing that Nevada has a lot more reports, and so therefore the back of house reporting system may be different. And if we're talking about a device, that would be different. This device is on the floor, but this piece of equipment needs a field trial in Nevada to figure out if it can turn out 6 reports.
Well, but I would also offer that possibly that product has already been submitted to and goes to an ITL before it would ever get to that process. So that the way that the board could possibly do that is to manage that process through the ITL testing before it ever comes up for a field trial, so that the reporting and any of the requirements in Nevada, that's what that certification report is going to provide before it comes to you for a field trial.
You're saying pre-field trial.
Correct.
The ITL has looked at it, but Nevada is still requiring a full field trial, even though that particular piece of equipment is out in other jurisdictions.
And I guess maybe that's maybe a term of art or discussion that maybe talking about from in the industry's view, how it happens in a lot of other situations. That's how that ITL and those months of testing and the months of back and forth is there to do, so that you're providing a certification or approval report that it does meet all of the applicable requirements and standards that are established by a particular jurisdiction as part of whatever scripts or whatever other items are there. I'm just offering that up. That's something that's there so that it can be out of that post process and back and forth while it's in that field trial process. So they can be assured, because that's the whole point of the ITLs we would submit.
Let me ask a question to the whole group here, and I know there's a lot of people on YouTube, but you're the test audience here. How many people are here because you believe that Nevada is not approving gaming equipment fast enough versus not approving associated equipment? So gaming device, show of hands versus associated equipment. So gaming device and then associated equipment. Yeah, okay. So Mr. Dorsey, from your group, do you believe that gaming devices aren't getting out fast enough? Or do you believe those are not as slow, let's say, as associated equipment?
Well, I also think it also has a reference point of when you say gaming device, what's the breadth of that gaming device? Has it been deployed in a lot of other jurisdictions? Or is it maybe in the first couple of places in Nevada? Because they're all, I don't want to speak for any of the members because a lot of them are in this room and they have particular viewpoints on that. But I would say that gaming devices, it's the approval occurs. It just takes much longer in Nevada overall for products of all facets.
Do you know why?
I would submit why is maybe that extra layer of process that's required. It simply does not exist in other jurisdictions, which are sophisticated, and those products can simply be put out there. And that's one thing that we would be here to talk about.
And would you be in the camp of we don't need field trials, or we need highly conditioned field trials where the conditions are on the manufacturer side to keep the board posted, as opposed to sending things back, as Mr. Akers said, you have to go back to square one?
I would be maybe speaking on behalf of AGEM, there should be, or there can be a more risk-based approach where they should not be required, but if in a lot of sets of circumstances. However, if someone wishes to go through that process on a voluntary, or to use that to say, hey, I've never put this in a live environment, I'd like to do and utilize that field trial process. It's there. We want that process and procedure to be there for someone, but make that more of the market risk-based approach on the, for the licensee, rather than a prescriptive, because it simply requires, so if you think about the volume of items that are possibly coming through there, if every piece of new technology has to go through that process, think of the timelines, and that further might explain why things happen in other places or deployed other places much quicker than they are here.
Let me ask Chief Barbie, and again, I don't want this to be any kind of blame game, and I know you're all coming in with the same spirit I've got, but do you have an answer, Chief Barbie, on where the technology division, the lab would be if I set up these camps? That's the current camp the camp that doesn't need field trials at all, the camp that wants voluntary field trials, and the camp that says, don't you let us have field trials, but let us work through the kinks and just get back to you. And if you don't have an answer to that, don't feel free to say there's no answer.
I may not have a direct answer to all three of those camps, but go back to what's the purpose of the field trial.
Move that mic a little closer. It's not picking up. Try that.
So going back to the purpose of the field trial, let's understand what that is. That's the period of time, as Mr. Akers has suggested, that's where you put it out and let it get beat up. That's where you're going to find those issues that you can't experience in a Tesla. And it's during the field trial process that you have the agility to make those changes that are necessary. I'd say products come through. By the time they make it through an ITL process, maybe they're 75% where they need to be. These are numbers just for reference. And when I say where they need to be, I'm talking about for compliance. Get them out on field trial, and that's where you're going to experience those issues that you just can't replicate in a lab environment, that you wouldn't have even thought to attempt to do, or a drink down the front of a device or whatever the case may be. That field trial process allows the manufacturer to make changes, and we authorize those changes verbally during a field trial. Let's say that you run into an issue during the trial. You need to make a change, you notify us of that change, and we authorize those changes. Once that field trial is done, we're asking that you do have all of those changes that you made during the trial verified through the test lab and certified so that we can get that final signature that Mr. Akers was speaking about. The field trial process allows us to evaluate a product on a limited basis right now. There's a high volume of transactions that happen in Nevada. The field trial helps us to get the any of those issues that might show themselves, and they might not necessarily, issues might not be the right word to use there. There might just be things that come up during a field trial that aren't necessarily a problem. It might be just something that someone didn't think about how to handle a certain situation or not. It allows us to get those things ironed out again on that limited distribution before the wide scale distribution of the product. So let's get a product that, let's say, starts field trial at 75%. By the time the field trial is over, we believe it's where it needs to be. We believe it's 100%, but it's really only be about 90%. You're going to make iterative changes over the course of time. And it's once you get your product approved that you go into the, you have to get the incremental changes approved through our process, but you have wide scale distribution at that point. You distribute it however you like. So I just wanted to give a quick overview and clarify that that's the purpose and how a field trial works. Do we do field trials or not? Do we scale back how we do field trials? I'm certainly for exploring those options. We do, during a field trial, test those things that demonstrate most of the time the audit trail. I think the chair asked a question about gaming devices and associated equipment. Gaming devices are ubiquitous, every jurisdiction. I would ask you what the uniformity of standards are. I'd say easily you can go to any jurisdiction and we're 85, 90% on the same page. Having a gaming device that's approved in Pennsylvania or New Jersey, there's little you have to do to get that gaming device approved here other than go through our whatever process is that's defined in regulation right now. I think where the pain point comes in is when you're dealing with the associated equipment. That's everything else. That's everything that has an accounting impact, revenue and patron protection. I think that's what separates Nevada from some other jurisdictions is that we have more stringent requirements. I'm aware that Nevada requires practically every other jurisdiction out there from an accounting act. We separate revenue more specifically. We require granular reporting on certain things. And the field trials that we conduct are designed to demonstrate that you can meet those Nevada requirements. I can appreciate that a product may have been deployed in another jurisdiction. I would ask how similar is that jurisdiction's reporting or regulatory requirements to Nevada, and that we explore where those deltas are.
That's a decent question, and you're sitting here, Mr. Dorsey. Let me ask you that, and may have to turn to Chief Fremont. But That's my understanding as well. Nevada requires a lot of more granular reporting than a lot of other jurisdictions. And anybody who wants to jump up and answer this, if it's not Mr. Dorsey's question, what would you say about that?
Well, maybe I would approach with a general answer first is then why are all those reporting items there? If the issues and core fundamental purpose behind this is player integrity and that any and all of the taxes or fees that are owed to the particular jurisdiction are there to satisfy whatever public policy purposes are there.
Yeah, I'm
If-
guessing
if-
a lot of it probably came back from the skimming days, and there's probably a bunch of other reasons. But Nevada's been doing this for so long. Government in general, you don't take two stacks of books and take one away. You add one more on top and one more on top. So I'm betting we've been doing this so long that we've got a lot of things that maybe some of these other jurisdictions aren't doing. Let me, without stopping you, I apologize, Mr. Dorsey. Chief Fremont, is there something that is required by statute or regulation that we have to do that maybe other states aren't doing? Do you know?
One thing I can say is that from an auditing standpoint, we're statutorily required to audit per AICPA standards. So that means there's a lot of things we have to do when we audit, which is why we have such granular information, because we just can't go and do superficial audits. We just can't go out and take the bottom line number on a report, see that it made it to the tax return and be good. There's so much more that we're statutorily required to be doing, which means that how those numbers are made up, there's so many components to that number that ends up on the tax return. We have to look at all of that. So, I mean, we're just required to do this type of auditing.
Yeah, so that may go in our second column there, and I'm interested to hear what others of you that are doing business in other very regulated states. But if they're not doing the reporting that we're doing, maybe we go to the legislature and say why. Just because we've been doing it since the 50s or the 60s or 70s, do we need it? And I cut you out. Go ahead.
Can I also just add, like, there's other agencies out there that can do a very simple, basic audit. For example, Department of Taxation, their sales and use tax. That is so simple. That is just taking an N number and tracing it to the report. They just don't have that requirement that we have. So I just wanted to point out that there's other agencies out there that they're just doing a very basic, very simple. They don't even look at everything. They maybe sample a few months in the period, but we just have to look at everything.
And the reason I bring up reporting, and you all correct me, I will never have your knowledge of the industry that you do, but because we break it out into table game revenue, slot revenue, we break it down so much, your equipment has to report, correct me if I'm wrong, into different layers, which you probably don't have to do in many other jurisdictions.
But also, I would add, Mr. Chairman, when we talk about those auditing and accounting process, how many of them apply and how many duplicate checks are there when they flow from an operator? When we're talking about the field trial process for a piece of associated equipment or a gaming device versus making sure that the appropriate tax collection has been remitted pursuant to all of that various reporting.
So what do you think?
So I'm saying, is there,
do you think
who is that audit requirement on? Are we talking to make sure that the associated equipment or the piece that in a field trial goes, you've also got ongoing reporting and auditing processes on the operator within that gaming establishment as well, where those are going to be reported up through. It doesn't only just simply end at the particular product or associated equipment. And that's just on a general.
Yeah. Do you think, though, that it's a statutory change, a regulatory change? What would make us be able to, the most important thing, right? Customer gets a fair and honest game. State of Nevada knows how much money was played so that we can collect tax. If we didn't collect tax, we really wouldn't need the second floor here, right? So we're here to regulate the industry because we try to create a fair and honest game, and we collect the tax for the state for doing so. If we're doing, as you may mention, the same audit or the same reports 3 or 4 different ways against 2 or 3 people in the industry chain, yeah, that's kind of silly.
Well, we would simply talk about when we talk about this particular issue that there's no specific statutory change that's necessary. It would be morely about it within the agency's prerogative on how it wishes to address those particular items. We talk about regs and how the processes work. versus how much is required to be remitted by statute. Because I think what we're talking about is making sure that the reports and processes are there, right? But that's an administrative function of the agency.
What could I write up here on the whiteboard, though, that would fix your concern? Are we still talking about field trial only, or are we talking about reports? And maybe I confused the two.
Well, I think that, and I don't want to speak for the chief either, when we were having, it's more of a holistic discussion. When we talk about why there's a lot of delays and why products, innovations, and other items occur other places before they occur here. That's the genesis of this is one such circumstance. I'm not here to say from a policy perspective what we should not be doing. I'm merely here to tell you that these things don't happen in other places because maybe they don't have some of those subsequent reporting requirements or things that have to be going through for some sort of a regulatory approval process. But that adds time. And that's what I mean to say about this is that we think adopting a more adaptive or innovative or risk-based approach in how ways we could reduce certain of those, whether that comes from the agency's determination and discretion on what it wants to put the industry and a licensee through. And would that bear fruit in cutting that timeline down?
Yeah, and there may be a way. I'm just using the reports as an example. Tax collection, tax reporting. Maybe Nevada has a lot of reporting that's necessary, but if you're telling me that 4 or 5, 6 other really regulated other jurisdictions don't need that, and maybe the field trial is focusing on does the reporting work,
and
as
also
opposed to
talking
the
about
other piece.
maybe the manufacturer supplier of the product versus the actual operator where the point of sale or the actual gaming event takes place, because there's other processes that affect the particular, and I'm not here to speak on behalf of the operator. I'm here on the manufacturers and suppliers, but I think there might be a distinction there as well.
Yeah, and certainly we want to hear from the operators as well, because at the end of the day, they're the ones getting the customers who say this broke post-field trial, or they're dealing with patron disputes and everything else. So it has to be hand in glove, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would also add, that we could benefit, like we talked about, that is because we're no longer one of the small jurisdictions that has gaming, right? And so many of these products, when they get here, they've also been deployed in a lot of other places for other period of time. That should, we feel, as maybe speaking on behalf of the manufacturer and supplier side, that should mean something, at least in our opinion, for the risk level, so that it's a more market and more balanced approach that we could pursue here in Nevada.
Well, if GLI, BMM, whoever has approved it for another jurisdiction, explain to me, do you think the ITL is slowing down the process, or do you think Nevada is in the ITL process keeps going backwards? Is that the problem?
As here on behalf of AGEM, I would think that the issue, what we would be talking about, is that those might be in a competitive stance instead of a collaborative, cooperative, hand in glove approach.
Meaning
the ITLs and our testing function within the Gaming Control Board's technology division. There's a lot of effort and work that might go past one another. So maybe there has to be some sort of secondary process that's going on within the lab, but that's not being done at the ITL level. The way we would look at that is prescribe and utilize the ITLs. They're the independent testing laboratory. The framework was there a decade ago, and it was there specifically to bring products to market faster in Nevada, right? And reduce costs.
And isn't that happening? I mean, the lab in Nevada is using the ITLs. Where's the breakdown? And don't feel free. Direct this to me. It's not directed at technology.
And the
Direct
chief
it to
and I,
me.
we've had many, and I'm here on behalf of many of my members.
Sure.
You know that, and
I'm just asking a naive question.
Mhm.
So we send it out to the ITL, which Nevada has used, and what is Nevada not doing? We take GLI's word, we take BMM's word.
Well, I think the chief, and again, I don't want to speak for him, there still is a delta between some additional items that are being run through, is what he'd said is being done by the lab post ITL certification and approval.
Okay.
And I would mention that, as I referenced in other jurisdictions, that layer simply does not exist.
So you
So
want,
the IT,
no, go ahead. I was just going to say, so ITL says it's good, And you're saying that should be good enough. Good housekeeping seal approval, let it run.
They're registered with Nevada and the Nevada Gaming Control Board as an independent testing laboratory.
But you're saying that that's not happening. So good housekeeping seal of approval comes from GLI, and then Nevada still has questions.
Especially when it comes to new innovations, new gaming products, new devices, associated equipment, yes. If we're talking about a modification of an existing product that's been there for a long time, and I don't want to use any of my member-specific game products, but something that's been in the market in a new, that's quickly. That's not the issue that
We're
we're talking.
talking days
That
on
happens
those,
fast.
right?
That's very
Couple
quick,
of
and that's
days.
not what we're talking. We're talking about innovations. We're talking about new products and why they. What we're, the brunt of my remarks was more about why things don't happen here first. They happen elsewhere first.
Let me ask Chief Barbie, again, we're not talking any specifics, but to Mr. Dorsey's question, it gets approved by GLI, BMM. What would be the 3 or 4 or 5 other things that Nevada would say, yeah, I know they're done, but we still need to check these things?
I'm not quite certain what that delta that Mr. Dorsey, Darren, I'm not certain what additional that we do on top of a test lab. We don't do in-house testing after it's provided to us post the ITL certification. What we will typically do is take a product that's been submitted for final approval. We'll look at the certification material. Our engineers may wish to verify a certain feature or functionality, especially if it's something we haven't seen before. And then we typically move that product on to field trial. So I'm not quite certain of a delta there, but as far as collaboration goes, we collaborate daily with the independent test labs. We meet every other week with one, and maybe at least once a month with the other, to go over what's in the queue, what are any of the outstanding questions that they might have. DC Everwine's with me here today. He's a point of contact daily. He responds to questions on regulatory matters.
So I don't want to leave this.
I would also say that there's a little bit different issue if you look at the proposed or the framework as it exists in the memo that's attached to the workshop, that prior to a submission, there's a long period of time that when you talk about new gaming devices, new products, new innovations, which is what we're here to talk about today, there is a long time process before something actually then goes to the ITL. And that includes white papers, a lot of back and forth with the technology division for what it is, what it may need to meet, some back and forth reporting, some various things about whether it's a Reg 14 report or whatever. I'm saying there's a large layer that happens when it's a new or innovative idea.
So you're talking about the Chair Burnett's memo from 2015, where it's explained the process. Where do you think the added time is? So, and we can put this up there, or the chief can draw it out if need be. And I don't know if we had copies of this for everybody, but what it says is preparation, NGCB consultation, development, ITL certification, NGCB approval, future modifications. Where do you think the added time or an extra building block is put in there?
I would ask whether there's NGCB consultation required. If we have an independent test lab and we have specifically prescribed standards and we have timelines and objective standards that things are there, why would that be required?
So you think this memo should be revisited and maybe get rid of a couple steps?
Possibly. If we're talking about what the goal, this is again, this is not about what we're doing today. Sorry, I'm not close to the microphone. It's where to maybe improve and get better and make this process faster, more innovative for Nevada's gaming market. That's what we're talking about, rather than the way that, for possible ideas about getting things to the marketplace faster, or that their initial deployment would occur in Nevada.
And this is what you're talking about. You're talking about new gaming concepts and technology.
Yes.
You think maybe preparation should be consultation, right? You guys, I'm guessing, and I don't want to speak for the technology division, but I'm guessing they say the sooner we know about something, the better, because it's going to help us. But you think maybe preparation, board consultation, development could be collapsed and it would speed up things.
I could agree with that.
Yeah. Okay. That's something that certainly.
But we would also go even to talk about this process. If we're in an open discussion, is there's a possibility for advancement so that the ITLs serve the necessary purpose and are the effective extension of the regulatory authority for all of this, rather than it being multiple contact points. That's why I say it is reduced to a more bureaucratic approach, where it's a more collaborative and risk-based and more modern approach to how new gaming devices can be, or new gaming concepts, innovations, associated equipment, systems. I mean, that's where all the technology is headed. That's where everyone's going. So let's find ways to reduce all of that overlay so that we move Nevada back to the first place things are put out, because it's a timeline issue. I would also submit that, put aside timing and those kinds of items, these have real world effects, because I think I was mentioning it in some more of my prepared remarks. Remember, a gaming manufacturer or supplier does not provide, just develop and do the R&D for a product just in Nevada. It's a product that's going to go everywhere, and it takes years to possibly develop of R&D cost. Think of how much cost is being put into that product. So when you then develop a logistic process, procurement process to try to be able to satisfy consumer necessary demands, you're putting things out, thinking things out, and your product release plans are months and months and months. We're simply talking about trying to move Nevada back into the very forefront of that release cycle for companies. And and always keep that in mind, that it's not just a Nevada specific item that's being developed. It's being developed to go numerous places. And for purposes of scale and cost of efficiency, that product is submitted to an ITL, not one at a time. It's given over, and it's months and months of testing, rounds of back and forth, so that the certifications or approvals are not just received for one jurisdiction. There may be 20. So I just think that sometimes when we look at that more commercial or collaborative approach to things, instead of just a particular item that's looking, like you mentioned, it's something we put a process in place for how things were 20, 30 years ago, because that's just maybe not today's gaming marketplace. And our suppliers and manufacturers are putting in developing those products. They're being generated here, but they're also being exported.
What are other jurisdictions doing in terms of their approval process as it relates to jurisdictions that are not, that are other than them? So are they considering other jurisdictions and whether it's been approved there or not in their approval processes?
It more relates, Member Watkins, it relates, a lot of those is more like the independent test lab. They're relying solely on the testing and certification approval of that product, and then it's allowed to be commercially deployed in that jurisdiction. The independent test lab does the testing against its standards, provisions, regulations, and issues the certification report to that regulatory authority. They receive that administratively. There's no secondary process associated with that, and then it is available to be taken commercially to the market in most circumstances. There's just not that additional layer testing, inspection, scrutiny process from those regulatory authorities.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I guess I'm trying to understand whether, they are specifically considering approvals in other jurisdictions in their own approval processes, if that makes sense.
There are some jurisdictions which will accept certain approvals as
Like, call it reciprocity.
Correct, an approval process. I understood what you were talking about. Yeah,
Okay.
they would accept. Have you tested against these particular standards? Yeah. You've received a report. Okay, that will serve as an approval as far as we are concerned for that device or that product, that concept to be able to be deployed in our jurisdiction and meeting our required standards. It might be because they've adopted the same exact technical standards. Yeah. I would also say that this happens a lot in tribal gaming, which is becoming a lot more sophisticated, next door in California and a lot of places in the country. There's some set of standards that then serve the purpose for tens, hundreds of jurisdictions that might be available, so that those are being accepted. There is a reciprocity concept.
Wouldn't you think, though, that if something broke on tribal land, that they only have to report to themselves? Whereas if something broke on a Nevada floor, we've got to tell multiple properties, plus the regulators and everybody else. Isn't that a little bit of apples and oranges?
I would argue maybe not necessarily, because of the large in the scale and the scope of some of those tribal commercial gaming operations as well. I mean, I don't want to, those are sophisticated, thought forward regulatory
Sure,
jurisdictions.
and I
But I
don't
would
mean
also
to
note that
diminish that at
it may
all.
be
I
on the
just mean who they have to, who's the reporting structure if something goes bad, as opposed to having a separate state government regulatory agency.
understood, but I think that you did talk about this in your question to me, is also the market finds out about that, and the market is there to address that. If someone's making a product that's not satisfactory,
Yeah.
that's while that's being reported to the regulatory authority in that hypothetical, it's also being reported to the marketplace, and those people will be dealt with appropriately by the marketplace as well, because there's numerous other competitors for that particular product or that particular system or that particular associated equipment.
Yeah, and I appreciate your point that that's kind of like a real world field trial if it's out in those jurisdictions, because you're knowing what's going wrong, what's going right. I think the challenge here is we want Nevada approving them faster. So we lose that real world trial if Nevada is doing it at the same time, which I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying we will have some things break on the floor. You know, if you shorten field trials and you shorten the approval process, things will collapse and things will break. I mean, software is not 100%. Obviously, as I can tell from my iPhone, I'm constantly getting updates, right? Nothing wrong with that. But if things break and the consumer experience becomes patron disputes, or we don't collect the right amount of tax, then the board gets blamed for not collecting the right amount of tax. So we still have to have some regulation, but I don't believe that effective regulation and speedy regulation are at different ends of the field. I think they both coexist.
I'd agree with you. I don't think they're mutually exclusive concepts.
Good.
And I don't think the industry, that's again the tenor of what we're talking about here, is where we are. It's just those are the facts, but there are some possible ways that could speed innovations and first deployments of ideas. That's a policy and a more market-based and risk-based approach that we as an industry would welcome.
So if you can read my bad handwriting, what I put up there is less steps in new gaming approval process, which is certainly something we can look at. We can revisit this memo. We can revisit whether or not it takes 6 steps. You know, can we name that tune in 3 notes? Happy to look at that. Is there something else that we can put on action items?
I set a policy that you divest and basically delegate any and all of that regulatory analysis, testing, certification to the ITL framework, which was put in place and passed in statute, I believe, the 2013 session. And that's what that memo follows, because it's there.
Why do you think that didn't happen in 2013?
I don't know. I'm not here. I'm not here. I wasn't in this. I can't speak to that.
Me neither. Anybody else who actually has an answer to that, when you come up, feel free, because I know that as well. I mean, there was statutory change, there was regulations, there's assumed responsibility, there's a lot of things, and I don't know why they weren't done. Some of them require regs, which we can put in our reg columns, and we can move up on that. But if you're saying we don't need to do anything post ITL, maybe that's true. I don't know. I got to go back, and this won't be the end all be all. This meeting here, as you saw from the agenda, we can't make decisions by law today. So we'll probably have some more meetings, and maybe that's one of them is, do we need to do anything post ITL approval? And I can write that up there. That's an action item.
And we would note that doesn't require any regulation change, doesn't require any statutory change. That's within the agency's discretion and authority of how it wishes to make that decision.
Mr. Chair, after listening to Darren, I understand now what I believe you were referring to about the gap that Nevada does relative to an ITL. Excuse me. And you bring up a really good point about the pre-engagement that we do with manufacturers and innovators prior to a product even going to an ITL. That's that first couple of steps where, as the manufacturer, you do preparation and then you create a white paper basically outlining project or your product. What's key to understand is what the technology division is looking for during that process. First and foremost, we're looking to ensure that all of the entities are sufficiently licensed. So we want to understand who developed your product. Is this an instance where perhaps you had a third party developed, and did you assume responsibility for that? So when we're engaged during that consultation period, that's one of the things we're looking for, sufficient licensure. The other thing that we're looking for during that consultation period is to identify any potential policy or regulatory matters, such as maybe a concept that you want to offer. Does it fit within our regulatory framework? If you want to offer early payouts on a sports wager, something along those lines, let's make sure that that's something that's doable. So as we're engaged during that consultation, and that's we actually consider that a collaboration at that point, that we're discussing what are the features and functionality of your system. So if there are anything that needs to be ironed out, we can take care of that. And by ironed out, I mean, do you offer a feature that perhaps doesn't fit within our structure? Do you need to modify the feature, or do we need to modify our structure? So a lot of times we'll see reg changes come out of those initial collaborations. Some of the other things that we're looking for is how that product's going to be implemented and deployed. How is it architected? One thing that may be a little unique about Nevada, we still try to understand thoroughly every product that we approve, and that's why we have a staff of engineers and IT auditors. We want to understand, for example, if your portions of your system is cloud-based, where is it cloud-based? Where is the components, or excuse me, where are the components located? We do all of that during that first step. So as Darren pointed out, some of our engagements might start a year or two before a product actually gets submitted to us for approval. That would be after it's gone through the independent test lab process. And the process and procedure that's outlined in that industry memo, that's been an optimum process. Engage with us early so that we can identify any of those potential hitches in the get along, so that once it gets submitted post ITL, we don't run into those issues either during our evaluation prior to field trial, during the field trial, or let's just say it gets deployed, and we don't run into something that may be afoul of any of our regulatory requirements, or we may have missed a licensing implication in there. So our engagement with the innovators goes beyond just, if you plug it into slot A, does tab B light up? It's more than just a technical review. We do look for proper licensure, policy matters, and how it's going to be deployed. So when we're evaluating what we may wish to delegate, those are things we would need to take into consideration.
Do you think, Mr. Dorsey, that changes your philosophy on whether or not Nevada needs to know? Everything Chief Barbie brought up makes sense. Nevada needs to understand what it is, because if you get done and we say it doesn't fit policy, it'd be a waste of time. But I'm guessing that you would say, can't we do it quicker? Is there a step to take out?
Well, and I also maybe just look at the framework we're talking about, and I'll respectfully, on the assumed responsibility, there were no ever regulations that were adopted to address that statutory change. So what it particularly means, I'm not here. I can't speak with expertise on that.
Let me.
But
ahead,
what I would also say is just something else that's a critical point with this is that in these are circumstances where a Nevada licensee who's already been found licensed, been through the rigorous scrutiny and suitability process in Nevada. That's who we're talking about here, about these products. And we, as an industry, would just say, that there's in no way is anyone seeking to avoid scrutiny, because market participants, with issues aren't good for any of us. But we're talking about the opposite, because those that have already made the necessary steps, put effective policies in place, and come here to make the financial and regulatory commitment to Nevada to get a license here, they should simply see Nevada as the marketplace here as an opportunity and pursue those on the same terms as they do outside Nevada.
Sure.
That's, I think, maybe just the more metric on when we look at this.
Let me ask a question about the statute for assumed responsibility. I think it's 1715.
I know it's in 463.
That I could have guessed. By show of hands, obviously that statute gets passed, some regs were started, and then for whatever reason, again, I wasn't here, I don't know why. How many of you would like to see reg workshop to go back and fulfill this assumed responsibility by the licensee? Do you want regulations to take place? How many people don't want to see regulations done to fulfill what that statute did? How many people don't know what I'm talking about? Yeah, okay, good. That's fine. I mean, I don't know why those regs weren't ever done, but that's an easy one to put up there. Let's revisit whether or not we want to fulfill what the statutory legislative intent was and actually talk about it. So,
and I get the general construct, not to speak for the chief or Ms. Caruso or whatever else, but in theory or in concept, the idea was that you've got a manufacturer which has a bunch of integrated concepts, products, and possibly some software or some component parts, for lack of a better terms, that may be licensed or delivered by another party, but yet you may be owning 80, 90% of the product. So a Nevada licensee who has their non-restricted license, who's been found suitable in Nevada, can incorporate some concept of that without actually owning the software, without owning the rights to that within particular in Nevada. And it's a policy question, but I would think that the way technology continues to advance, that's something that we would want to find ways to promote rather than necessarily always just looking for licensure of a particular small component part when you do have a licensed entity who is responsible for it and is required and assumes that regulatory and legal responsibility for it as it pertains to Nevada.
Chief Caruso or Mr. Somps on the Zoom, what is that statute? The assume responsibilities at 463? Is it 0.01715?
I don't know off the top of
Mr.
my
Chair.
head.
Come on.
Mr. Chairman, it's Mike
Anyway,
Soms.
Mr. Somps?
Can you hear me?
I bet you Mr. Reeser knows it.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
You've cited.
The definition of assume responsibility is in 463-01715.
1715. Perfect. So that one, we as a board, we'll try to do that. And we'll figure out if everybody wants them or not. So we'll be happy to look into that. Mr. Reeser, do you have something to add?
The only thing I'd add, Mr. Chairman, is I believe that it ended because the argument that the statute speaks for itself.
I'm so sorry. Could you center yourself on the microphone? We can't hear you on the stream.
Yeah, Dan Reeser, Fenimore on behalf of AGEN.
So
The argument that was made was if you're a manufacturer and you say it's my problem, that's the end of the hunt. And that's what the statute says. And that there wasn't really a need to go into defining every term in the statute. The legislature basically said, if you say I'm responsible for this product, what else is there? You have a licensee on the hook.
So does 01715 say may pass regulations or shall pass regulations?
Well, this particular section doesn't talk about adoption of regulations whatsoever. It's a definitional section.
Gotcha. But there is another section that talks about a manufacturer may assume. That's the definition of assuming responsibility. Yeah.
Right. Definition.
Well, let's look at that. If it says may pass regulations, then we don't need to worry about it. If it says shall pass regulations, then that may have been where it got stuck. So let's look at it anyway. And I have no problem having we can have a reg workshop on whether or not regs are necessary. To Mr. Reeser's point, if they're not necessary, then it's just on the licensed manufacturer. Save time. Great. Did either of you have something else?
I would just conclude, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, this conversation, like we said, that's one way on the just simply doing the ITL plus. That was a way about bringing technology innovation to market first in Nevada. That's one proposed solution. And we did have that discussion. I know Mr. Akers referred to it as well, but is there an update or overhaul on that field trial process about whether there are other items. I'm sure there are countless items. I'm sure there's a whole lot of people behind me that are tired of hearing me talk. You may as well. But these are solutions that everyone wants to find so that we continue to go forward and improve and make our Nevada marketplace better, because our manufacturers have come here, built their bases here, and a lot of these ideas and innovations, let's just maybe get them to Nevada at the front of the line rather than going elsewhere and getting improved. That's a good thing for us overall because it can serve all of the public policy goals while also working in a more collaborative approach with the regulatory authority, because we've all made the choice to be here. We want to be here, and we welcome that scrutiny and that engagement. But let's just see if we can do a more risk-based, more modernized approach on how we look at this. And that might be a way we can improve.
Great. And that's the word, modernization. That's what we're here for. Let me do a little housekeeping here. It's 2:15. How many other people, by raises of your hands, are planning to speak today? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, good. Okay, that's better than 20 or 30. So I plan on taking a break in a few minutes, just a 5 or 10 minute break for us to do what you got to do. But why don't we go ahead and bring up the next speaker, and we'll just keep going on this time schedule here.
Another trade association.
Great, thank you. It's Valentine, nice to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Virginia Valentine. I'm with the Nevada Resort Association.
Push
I'm gonna
that a little
follow-
closer so they.
Thank you. I wanted to follow
Yep.
Mr. Dorsey because most of what I might have talked to you about today, I think he covered. So when we look at the entire process, and you go starting with a suitability review, the ITL review, Nevada test labs, and field trials. So I think if you start with the suitability reviews and you start to look at, are there ways to streamline or to speed that up? And I will tell you, I don't have experience in other jurisdictions. So I have to rely mostly on what I am told by my members. One of the things that was mentioned, though, was NRS 463.01715. So we appreciate the opportunity to continue out rehashing the whole argument. To continue that conversation on the ITL, I think for the most part, everybody's pretty happy with the ITL process. On Nevada test labs, I think that probably, and of course, Mr. Bybeek's the expert here. I think if we are looking at this, I tend to think about things in terms of process. A couple people mentioned timelines. I think that's really important, that timelines evaluated, and there are ways to speed that up, improve that. We'd be interested in those. Kind of a nuance. I'm told that in the majority of U.S. Jurisdictions, ones that adopt sports wagering, they implement change management policies. So I think that's a question of whether or not the regulatory body could oversee changes that affected the regulated components and changes outside of the ITL. So there could be a process that would allow U.S. Jurisdictions to readily implement system improvements to patrons and ensure the continuity of an ITL and regulatory body. Field trials, obviously, we need some more conversation on that. Lastly, I had a recommendation for cloud computing recommendations. The regulations under cloud computing and cloud service providers, NRS 463.1402C, as technology has evolved, suppliers have been using cloud service providers. Seizing a server during investigation would include non-gaming data. That data, of course, is encrypted. Cloud service providers wouldn't be able to decrypt that information. Gaming suppliers and operators can support investigation of the board and commission. We would suggest the implementation of digital seizure, where a cloud service provider and the licensee can cooperate during the investigation and provide the data overseen by the commission. So those are my comments. I don't think I added a whole lot new there, but be happy to answer any questions.
No, I think you did. I appreciate that. On the cloud computing, you talked way over my head, but we do allow some cloud computing. But Chief Barbie, am I missing something here? Are we allowing something but not maybe doing blockchain, or is there something that?
No, Mr. Chair, to Ms. Valentine's comment, those who come here and wish to provide cloud computing services are a little tense about it because NRS 463, whichever is related to service providers, states that the board has absolute authority as though that entity were a Nevada licensee. And there's some concern that we're going to show up at an Amazon facility in Virginia and want to go into their facility and have direct access to their. We discussed this a little bit during the cloud computing regulations here a few months back. Unfortunately, that one's outside of our control. The statute states that we have that authority. What I do when we speak to potential cloud computing service providers is I try to reassure them that we would have no need to physically show up. We use digital forensic methods to access remotely anything that we would need to access that's at a hosting center or via a cloud computing service provider. However, the statute does give the board that absolute authority to show up, and it makes them tense. So one of the things that I've suggested to them as well is that our legislature is in session now. That might be a conversation to have. But unfortunately, as far as cloud computing service provider goes, that's outside of our control as far as that absolute authority. I didn't get a chance to mention this earlier. Mr. Dorsey was speaking. Ms. Valentine hit on something about change management. We are talking about new products here today. To put that in context, we see 3 to 5 new gaming devices a year. We see maybe 20 new everything else's associated equipments a year. But what we see the most of are routine modifications to those products. We see approximately 1,000 gaming device modifications a year, maybe 200 to 300 associated equipment modifications. We do require, as Mr. Akers pointed out, that anytime you make a change to one of those controlled files, you have to get that approved ahead of time. We recognize that some of those changes might not be as significant as other changes. So what I've been doing, and I started this process last fall, I've talked to manufacturers, asked for some proposals there. I've been talking to my friends in Jersey about their process. Some of you who operate in Jersey may be familiar with, I think they call it maybe a release notes process, where you can make incremental changes, and then we would potentially evaluate them on a risk approach, maybe set some guidelines on what changes you could make to associated equipment, what changes that you could potentially make and then notice the gaming control board, and then maybe once a quarter have all of those changes tested through a lab. I haven't been able to present that process directly. You and I haven't been able to go through that process yet, but that is something that we're looking at that we think will help facilitate change management when it comes to those products that are already.
What would that require to implement?
I think it's potentially, I'm not certain if there's any regulatory changes that are necessary there. I haven't taken that next step, but I believe that we may have that authority within the board for associated
Yeah, so
equipment.
let's internally have a meeting on that and see what that would take to implement, and maybe ask New Jersey as well, how does their hierarchy of approval work on release notes? And I'll put that up there. I like that. That's a good idea.
I've been working with New Jersey on that.
Great. Great, thank you. Ms. Valentine, did that answer your question about cloud computing? Was that on topic?
That was very encouraging. Virginia Valentine, Nevada Resort Association for the record, and we would welcome the opportunity to continue working with Chief Barbie on cloud computing and what that would look like, and also with any kind of change management, whether that's something that goes into practice or into regulation, so that some of those changes that he described could happen more expeditiously. And I think he made a good point. He sees a lot more of those than he sees of new games and equipment. So we'd welcome the opportunity to continue working with you.
Do you hear from some of your members that, and don't let me put words in your mouth, but are things getting out from our approval process that are maybe not fully baked before they hit the floor? Is that causing problems at the operator level, or is it at field trials and they expect those things to happen? Or is it just part of, like what I mentioned earlier, that no software is bulletproof?
Virginia Valentine, for the record, I haven't asked them that question, and I haven't had that information volunteered to me, so it's something I would have to follow up on.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you. Mr. Akers, did you have another question, or?
Wanted to make a remark about innovation aspect. And I think Chief Barbie brought something to a head, and appreciate comments. But if we are going to have a period of a year or two of consideration before we can start to deploy a product, where we dialogue and have a limited number of people in the lab come to have a full understanding of every product, we kiss innovation.
I don't think that was what the chief was saying. I think he was saying if you guys start it at day one, maybe let us know by day 360. Am I correct?
Our,
or
our
you-
process shouldn't take anywhere close to 360 days to come up with an innovation.
Yeah.
We want to be able to do what they do on the internet as closely as possible and come up with an idea today, deploy it in 2 or 3 months, and test it in a live casino to see what's wrong with it.
Yeah. To that point, Chief Barbie, do you believe we couldn't be meeting with them or understanding what was going on for policy reasons, not for innovation reasons? It's we wouldn't want you to get so far down the road that this doesn't fit policy, right? Which I got to believe most of you are from Nevada. You know what the policy is. So does that make sense?
It does. I think communication is the key
Yeah.
there. And what we try to do to get in front of that is each of you who are major suppliers, we meet with you at least once a month. We have a standing meeting where you can come to the lab. Obviously, we've been doing that Zoom the last few years, but you come by and we discuss whatever it is that you want to discuss from an innovative standpoint, maybe some products that you have in development, what may be the regulatory touch points. If we have any products that are currently on trial or that are under our review, we can give you an update on that. But that puts us both in the same room, so to speak, so that we can discuss whatever those matters might be. So I think that communication is key there. We do that same meeting monthly with various operators as well. We are more than happy to have those type of dialogues so that we don't find ourselves on the wrong side of a product coming through and there be something that might be a gotcha or a hitch in the get along. To be clear, the conversation of 2 to 3 years, I can say some manufacturers may have said, hey, we want to bring a product to Nevada. What are the requirements? And we start that engagement then. It doesn't take 2 to 3 years to get a product from start to finish. Depending on the complexity of your product, that may take a bit of time. If you have a simple product with only 5 variables, that may measure those in weeks or months from whatever time we're engaged. If you have a larger product like a race and sports pool system, and then you realize that you have 37 reports to generate for Nevada when you thought you only had 2, that's going to require a significant amount of development time. And often that gets lost in the discussion, as well as we will have initial conversations, but then you may need to go back and do some development on that. So that does contribute to that overall time frame.
And all I would say is that if we believe that increasing revenue is important, then we all as partners have to find a way to move much more quickly.
Sure.
That there's not enough time to explain everything in every detail. And a lot of times we find that when we submit something, a white paper, we wait a month, 2 months just to hear back the first comment. And those delays are horrible for us. It allows other jurisdictions to move ahead. It keeps us responding to younger people.
So would you say if we need things for policy or things that the board just needs to run its business, you submit a white paper, you should be able to keep going. In other words, you're not waiting for answers.
Love it.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
One more thing,
Yeah.
Chairman. Rich Primus is here from Penn Entertainment, and he unfortunately has to leave here at 3. So it's whatever your schedule is, if you could get on it, that'd be great.
I'm fine with that if you want to speak next. And then we'll probably take a 5 or 10 minute break here around 2:45 or so, but please.
Hi, members of the board, Mr. Chairman.
Good afternoon.
Rich Primus, Primus. I'm the Chief Information Officer for Penn Entertainment. And by way of background, we have 37 casinos in 18 jurisdictions, 45,000 slot machines, 1,300 tables. Sort of anecdotally as part of this conversation about innovation. And one thing, we're incredibly committed to partnering with all regulatory bodies to try to successfully bring products to market in a safe, responsible way that takes care of the players, takes care of taxes, takes care of all the compliance reporting. And we have a solution for cashless gaming that we've been rolling out around the country. We call it 3 Cs, cashless, cardless, and contactless. Everything has to have an acronym now. But and we're currently live in 10 jurisdictions at 21 of our properties, and probably about 70% of our machines in the portfolio are live with the solution. And our first one went live in June of 21. So we've been at this for quite some time. And incredibly well received from both our regulatory partners as well as our customers. Really great results.
very, very few technical issues, and we've been able to fulfill all the reporting requirements. I think, and we've been struggling a little bit in Nevada because of, I think, getting through the regulatory process and some of the regulations themselves. And I think it was alluded to by several folks earlier. I think some of the regulations and/or the interpretation are written based on technology that was created over a generation ago. So the way modern solutions are architected, things are more modularized, taken away from some of the core systems and pulled out of the ecosystem to keep that casino system really simple, and then allow the customer engagement layers to happen in other ways. And that's where we've been getting tripped up because of some words that are in the regulations from a very long time ago, that we've got a solution that's architected that could very, very well fulfill the compliance reporting, the financial reporting, the tax purposes. We've successfully done this, as I said, many, many times. But we've been just running into some hurdles of getting it through that process. And really what happens is then just other regulators end up, coming to us to get in line. We have 2 others going live. So by the end of May, we'll be live in 12 of our 18 jurisdictions with this. And I think the more we can partner together, and I think for me, that's what this is all about, is finding ways to work together. Everybody is well intended in this process. I have zero doubt about that. But I think bringing some interpretation to some of the regs and/or the language in the regs based on some older technologies, I think could help get innovation through the process safely, but a little more quickly, to give your players the same advantages that some of the other players have, because there's a lot of different ways to architect very similar solutions. And when the regulations are built based on one basic architecture for 20 years, well, the world has changed, and we've got to be able to support varying architectures in a way that we're fulfilling the regulatory requirements, but understanding that some of the words don't meet the regulations.
What regulated jurisdiction would you say, and like you said, they've done it more recently than us, which jurisdiction or jurisdictions would you say their regulations fit the modern world better than Nevada's that have been in place for 60, 70 years?
For this solution specifically, I'd say the 2 jurisdictions we've ended up working the most closely with, because they also have very high standards and wanted to be very involved. Our first regulatory environment we rolled this out in was Pennsylvania, and we collaborated with the interpretation of the regs and really adding some language to help with the testing requirements, and that went very well. Missouri also is a very, very involved regulatory environment, and we spent an enormous amount of time with their technical teams and their legal interpretation teams to make sure that we were all speaking from the same language, meaning the interpretation of the regulation sometimes is as important as the specific word on the piece of paper. Without minimizing the words on the piece of paper, I understand that's critical as well. But it was just highly collaborative and highly, we spent a lot of time together back and forth, whether it be on video calls or in person, going to labs, having them come to our labs together. And we were able to get Pennsylvania, I think we went from day 1 to live in no more than 4 months. And that was from crafting.
And do you or your legal counsel have specific regulations that you think need to be changed in Nevada's commission regulations to speed up that process?
I would probably defer to our chief compliance officer on that one, Chris Soriano, and I'll have him follow up.
Yeah, wonderful. Please do that. They can send it to Chief Barbie or the Attorney General's office, copy me, whatever. And because if we have a reg workshop, we can certainly put several different regs on the agenda.
This is a very important market for us, and we want to be able to come to market in a responsible way. And I think we can find ways to partner together to advance the industry and technology while protecting the customers and protecting revenues.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you.
That's everything. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Who else wants to speak next? Please. Afternoon.
Mr. Chairman, board members, my name is Omer Sattar, first name Omer, last name Sattar, Sattar, the co-founder and co-CEO of a Vegas-based company called Sightline Payments. And firstly, I apologize, I'm dressed so casually. I had no intention of speaking today, but given the discussion, I feel compelled to share our thoughts. And there's a lot of people in this room that I have a lot of respect for, Mr. Akers being one of them, and they are partners of ours. I moved to Vegas in 2005 for what was going to be 6 months. Never left. We started our company in 2009 and used to be a much smaller company than it is today. We now do business in 38 states and in Washington, D.C. And we've been a Nevada licensee, I want to say since 2011. I'd have to go back and check. I think my chief legal officer is in the room. I could ask her. And some of what we heard is concerning, and we want to share our thoughts. And we like the process in Nevada, especially the delta that's been spoken about. And I want to speak a little bit about it philosophically, practically, but generally, and then practically with a specific our own experience here in Nevada. Philosophically, we lived through the financial crisis here in Nevada. There's much nuance that we can talk about around the financial crisis, but I think no one can dispute the fact that the ratings agencies were critical in what happened in the financial crisis. And what it seemed like were truly representing the buyers were actually representing the sellers. And that is part of the delta, which we believe is so important, which the current structure in Nevada serves. And having the oversight, having the set of eyes. And earlier, Sightline used to have very little money. I used to travel and meet gaming regulators all over the country because we had no ability to either hire lobbyists or have a large legal staff. Traveled all over the country, meeting both tribal and commercial commercial regulators. And what we find, and trust me, as a business person, I want less bureaucracy. But technocrats are not a bad thing, because technocrats can also read experts. And so when I can give you an example. You mentioned blockchain. You can go to 20 regulators around the country and ask them what a blockchain is. And I'd be shocked if one out of those 20 actually knows what it is and why it's better than the internet. And you can ask them about generative AI. You can ask them about KYC technology, ID verification, computer vision. When you talk about real new product enhancements and improvements that are going to change the casino business, then the vast majority don't know. We would, in fact, posit that there is value in adding greater technology expertise in the gaming control board structure of Nevada, in particular in the licensing division. So as innovators, when we bring in technology, I was at CES this year, I saw, someone mentioned Amazon, I saw computer vision technology that will blow you away. I could probably think of a half a dozen enhancements that can happen to the US brick and mortar casino industry using computer vision. And would it help us if there's a computer vision expert that could evaluate that technology? Certainly there would be. So, we think there's value in adding, and that's my general comment, having met so many regulators. And we travel to jurisdictions. We're in the payments business. I could talk to you for hours about the payments business. And the understanding of the payments business and the nuances of it is minimal. And let me share one specific example with you. In 2021, we worked extensively with the Gaming Control Board, also with the Commission, to do what's called a remote ID verification here in the state of Nevada. Remote ID verification went live several months ago, and for cashless wagering. And it was a process, and there was a great deal of work involved in that. And Chief Barbie and the team, when we talk about that delta, push back on us. And in hindsight, I'm actually very glad they pushed back, because it forced us to go look in the marketplace and find better and additive technology that we were able to bring to the market, and it's going to keep getting better. So, while we, again, as a business person, my general comment is, I don't really want government until I need it. The problem in this case is that by the time you need it, it's probably too late. And so having the additional oversight is not a bad thing. And now,
excuse me,
sorry,
I don't want to interrupt, but before I forget, so are you saying added experts need to be added to state government regulators, or are you saying that maybe the ITLs need more experience and the regulators could let them do it?
Either way, sir. I mean, either way, we're going to pay for it, right? We, as the people who are innovating, are going to pay for it, and we're okay paying for that. Right? We're okay paying for, like, when I would hear, I agree with a lot of what Mr. Primus is saying, right? Is a paper ticket needed to be printed at a table game? Certainly not. As someone who's from the payments business, we do billions of dollars of volume now across the jurisdictions that I'm talking about, and we reconcile to the penny every single day. There's no paper. So can we balance the table? Sure, we can balance the table. And when we do it in so many jurisdictions, so many places. And but on the flip side, like the process that's been spoken about in submitting white papers, we like that process. Right? It allows us to really think about what it is that we're building. We're working on 3 of those right now with the Gaming Control. where we asked for the meeting. We made a presentation. We were then asked to do a white paper. We're going to do the white paper. We're going to submit the white paper, and we're going to build products around that. And having that standard of care that is a higher standard than other jurisdictions, we again think is a good thing. So we like the construct, and from that perspective, from the perspective of moving things quicker, certainly can, right? But again, in the construct of business, there's you can have SLAs, we can have turnaround times, and the one comment that Mr. Akers made that I'm truly passionate about, as someone who raised capital for our business, and for what it's worth, our single largest shareholder today is Mr. Bill Foley. Our local owner of the Golden Knights. We have very significant investors in our business, and we were able to get over this inflection hump of raising money. We believe the single biggest reason why you don't see innovation, why we don't see innovation is gaming, is because it is virtually impossible for entrepreneurs to raise money. Less than a tenth of a basis point of all venture capital funding in America comes to gaming today. And the issue is if I go to Sand Hill Road or Menlo Park and I go to Silicon Valley and I say I have a great idea around generative AI and I want to bring it to analyze slot data, and the VC says, all right, how much money do you need? Mrs. Starr, I need $5 million. And oh, but by the way, it's going to take me 2 years to get licensed to try the product out, and then we don't know if there's a return on that capital or not. And that is the number one reason. I know this because I tried for years to raise money. I've used this example publicly many times. Many years ago, we were trying to raise a round of capital of $20 million, and we couldn't. We downsized to 15. We couldn't. We downsized to 10. We downsized to 5. In that round of capital raise, we say to raise $700,000. And so the only people who we find end up innovating to bring new technologies to our industry are people like Mr. Akers, who have built businesses previously, and they end up financing themselves, or like us, where you either end up financing yourself or it's through friends and family. So if there's an ability to change a law, to put something on the whiteboard, statute or a regulation, to allow venture-backed companies to try products in Nevada, and now we will see real innovation open up. So those are some of our thoughts.
Good. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. By show of hands, how many other people are still planning to speak today? 2. Great. Why don't we take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back and try to finish up in the next hour. Thank you. All right. Let's reconvene here for hopefully the second half of this game. All right. Thank you all. Back on the record here. It's a little bit before 3 o'clock. Who would like to be next to come up and speak? Please.
Good afternoon, Chair Hendricks, Judge Assad, Member Watkins. Thank you for having us. My name is Faisal Khan. I'm the Vice President of Technical Compliance for Stadium Technology Group. Joining me is Rakesh Kumar Bachu. He's our Chief Technology Officer. So firstly, since it's an open dialogue, I did write a document I'd like to share with you. Since it's an open forum, just go ahead and speak freely. So truly did enjoy hearing from all the individuals sitting behind me. As I look in this room, I see well over 20, 30 years of experience and quite a few individuals I've worked with in the past. So fantastic comment, really appreciate the time. So Rakesh and I, we come from an engineering technical background. And one of the key comments that was made by the gentleman from Sightline is about innovation. There's 3 words I picked up on. One is collaboration, communication, which leads to innovation. And so there's been numerous times when Rakesh and I, we've gone over to the technology office, taken the whiteboard, grabbed a pen, and drawn out our solution. And so if you look at the process that was mentioned here back from 2015, the memo that was issued by AG Burnett, we follow that to a T. We have white papers, we have documentation, we have diagrams, we bring that to the technology division, we take it to our ITL, we sit down with both parties, have extensive dialogue. So I'll give you some numbers, and that's really what I want to focus on is the process. So if you look at the time for our standard submission is something that's been approved in the state of Nevada. It's a modification to our prior version. Roughly speaking, when I look at the numbers for the last couple of years, between 4 to 6 weeks. So right about 4 weeks with the ITL, and then right about 2 weeks or less with the technology division. And that's the standard process. When it comes to an audit, it could be much longer. So one of the things we looked at when we start developing for the state of Nevada, we look at our feature list and say, hey, is this going to involve an audit? If it is that something we have time to release now, or do we want to wait a little bit? So the process is critical for us. And of course, as a manufacturer, we fully understand the requirements set forth by Nevada Gaming, as well as every other jurisdiction. For Nevada, though, specifically, our team gets together and we start the development process based on exactly what is the change we're looking at, and does it impact the audit process? If it does impact the audit process, we know there's going to be an extensive timeline. So one of the, and there's all the items that you've noted, Chair Hendricks, I do agree with. So looking at the ITL approval process and the Nevada approval process, if the ITL were to make a decision saying, hey, this is approved for the state of Nevada, is that acceptable? Or could it be the Nevada team makes a decision saying it's acceptable for the state of Nevada? But if you look at the timeline altogether, just for a standard submission, we're talking about 6 weeks. The key question I have is, how can we reduce that? Would it be acceptable to say, hey, the ITL approval is good enough? Or could we have a process where you look at individuals from the technology division, have them come to our office, look at the process, look at our code, look at our development process, and be able to sign off on that and get that to the field a bit quicker. So the key thing we're looking at as a manufacturer is how do we get our process to the field a little bit faster? I'm not opposed to field trials at all. In fact, we encourage them. One of the things we learned from a field trial is exactly how the product is going to play out in the field. And then we also get feedback from the audit division, we get feedback from the enforcement division. We know as manufacturers the product's going to work or not. But we've gone through numerous field trials. And I think ultimately from our perspective, how can we get our product to the field trial quicker? Now, one thing we'll tell you as a supplier, fully transparent. I have teams right now at the office that are going throughout the day, 5 days a week, testing our product. We have test results from our own testing teams. We have test results from EMM, the ITL, and of course we have testing information from Nevada Gaming. So how can we work together in that collaborative spirit and present a product that we know we can launch with confidence, both from the operations side, Nevada Gaming Control Board, manufacturer, and then watch the product, does it perform well? So those are the key areas, specifically processes that we'd like to focus on. But having said that, we'd also like to take a look at regulations and statutes. And as you mentioned, Chair, maybe we have another workshop that looks at those regulations and provide that comment. And then lastly, I believe Chief Barbie had mentioned the change management process. We already provide our feedback in that process as well. So those are the key areas we'd like to discuss and possibly explore.
Thank you for that specific action item. Regulatory changes, the governor's given a mandate to the entire state to go through your regulations and try to get rid of things that are old, outdated, duplicative. So as a board, I think we're all open to looking at regulation changes. As this industry, unlike some of the other state agencies, we go through our regs with the industry on a constant basis. So I don't believe there's a complete overhaul necessary.
Right.
But if everybody wants to sit down and take a 2-day workshop and do it, well, I'm certainly open to that. So if you have any suggestions, I've got one here from a manufacturer. Certainly submit those. And we know that there's one particular one we're going to look at, assume responsibility. Does that need regulations? But if you have others, any of you, please feel free to submit them.
And one thing, Chair, I'd like to mention is, we had the gentleman from Sideline speak earlier, and he talked about having technology experts, possibly both with BMM, the ITL GLI, as well as Nevada Gaming. And we would highly encourage that, because we do want to bring innovation to this industry. We do want to have our top to bring ideas to the table. We'd like to sit down with the Gaming Control Board staff and clearly draw out our ideas and explain exactly how those are being met by regulation. So clearly show you our reporting processes, show you exactly what we do as part of our development cycle, and then help the industry understand that, hey, we feel this is secure enough to go ahead and launch in the field. Now, having said that, if it goes to field trial, and depending upon the feedback, at least we're launching with full confidence between Nevada Gaming Control Board manufacturer operator that we know on paper, in theory, it does work. So those are the key things I'd like to look at as we move forward. How can we make that process a bit quicker so we can get our product in the field quicker and check all the respective boxes?
Yeah, appreciate that. And that's a good segue for me to do a little PSA on behalf of the board here. I was up presenting our budget on Friday in front of the legislature. As you would all expect, state salaries are, and this is across the entire state, it's difficult to recruit and retain really qualified, experienced people. The level of people you're talking about, based on what the state pays, is difficult. Any of you who've been in state service know that we, the legislators themselves, governor here, you do it because it's a passion. You do it because you believe that you're going to make a difference and you can leave your mark. But the amount of money that, like our deputy chief is making, he is decided for his family's benefit. I don't want to speak on your behalf, but he's moving on to another location to better his family.
Right.
Nobody can argue against that. And we're losing some state trained people at our lab, at our enforcement division, certainly our audit division, our tax and license division. We're losing good people after we train them. They're going to other state agencies. There's nothing I can ask you to do other than, if you bump into a legislative member, let them know that it's difficult for state right now. To bring in an expert would almost be unheard of based on what we're paying. I think our deputy chief job tops out at, correct me if I'm wrong, deputy chief, I believe it tops out at $113,000. 118, there you go, $118,000. Somebody's got to devote their life to believing in what they're doing in state government to stay here for as many years as the deputy chief or the chief have. And so I know I'm preaching to the choir and holding my hat, my hand, and passing it around, but it's difficult to bring in specialists at that rate. Doesn't mean we couldn't do it at the ITL level, though. If we say to them, we need you to have somebody qualified to look into new innovations.
Right.
As we were mentioned earlier, if there's new innovations out there that they can bring or we can bring state employees up to speed.
Right.
Certainly want to do it. And so I'll jump off my soapbox now, but open a good segue that we're happy to do it. We're doing it on a limited staff. And of course, that back to this whole meeting
Right.
slows things down. If we don't have enough staff, certainly not trained staff, things are going to get slow.
I mean, we certainly appreciate the feedback. One compliment I would like to make to both the ITLs and Nevada Technology Lab, and I call them frequently. I'm probably the guy who's calling them every week. Every time I requested a meeting, they've both been able to accommodate, actually go to the office, explain our solution, and that's a process I will tell you doesn't work. You know, I mean, just it's really not even the dialogue itself. It's just being able to have that dialogue quicker. So, and whatever we can from a manufacturer standpoint, that means having DMM staff or the ITL staff come in our office along with technology division staff, showcasing our product, whatever we can do to help expedite those 6 weeks for a short period of time. And that's just for standard approvals. Now, when we talk about new technologies, that's really where my focus is. How can we minimize that time frame and provide that level of confidence that, hey, our product will as that. So again, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
Really
thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Who's next? Governor? You, sir. You're next on the hot seat.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and board members. Good to see you, and congratulations to two of you who are brand new on board and joining Brittany, which means we now have 3 great people. It's my pleasure to be here today. For the record, it's Robert List, L-I-S-T. And I was reflecting on the importance of this gathering and of this workshop, and in the context of the evolution of this industry. It's interesting to me that it was 92 years ago this week that gaming in Nevada, full-blown gaming in Nevada, was approved in 1931. And the stages that we've been through since then have been phenomenal. I mean, in the beginning was strictly authorized for tax purposes. So all anybody paid attention to was, you know, make sure you pay your taxes. Didn't matter who applied, they got a license. And that went on for a surprisingly long time. You know, it wasn't until Governor Sawyer came in and established some newer standards with a control board and a commission being created. And they established the Black Book, for example. And if someone was really notorious, they were put in the Black Book and they couldn't visit any of the casinos. But there was little attention paid to the licensees and the owners and the subject matter of audits and how they were being handled. But it was to Governor Sawyer's credit that we started to turn the corner. Governor Laxalt brought a new dimension to it when he got the legislature to approve licensings of publicly traded corporations. Before that, it could only be individually held companies. And that made a big difference. It brought in the Hiltons and others, and they in turn came along and acquired some of the properties that had been originally clearly in the hands of mobsters who could not possibly pass muster today. And I guess I've had a front row seat to it since shortly after since the Laxalt days. I was Attorney General of Nevada in the 1970s, and when I took office, we knew that there was still the mob was involved in the Las Vegas gaming community and possibly elsewhere in the state. But we'd never really had a good test case to go to court with to establish a tighter rein on suitability and what suitability was all about. And we came across the Lefty Rosenthal case, which proved to be a wonderful test case. He applied for a gaming license, as I'm sure most of you know. It was the opportunity we've been looking for. And I had 2 great lawyers working for me, Michael Sloan and Bud Hicks, both superstar in the history of gaming regulation. And Lefty Rosenthal came before the commission. He was denied a license. The lower court reversed that and said he could have a license. He retained a man named Erwin Griswold, who was the #1 constitutional lawyer in America. He'd been dean of the Harvard Law School. He'd been Solicitor General of the United States. And he teamed up with none other than Oscar Goodman on behalf of Rosenthal. And so we then took the case to the state Supreme Court. And I argued it there against Griswold. And I remember that day very well. The legislature actually recessed and came over and watched the arguments in the Supreme Court. It was that important. And we fortunately got a 5-0 ruling from the Supreme Court upholding the authority of the state of Nevada to regulate as we chose to do, which is tight reins on suitability. And the court actually held it and specifically enumerated the fact that the gaming license is a regulated privilege. It's not a property right. You can revoke the licenses, or you can deny the licenses based on reasonable considerations of an individual's back suitability, relationships, and sources of money, and so, which is done today. And that really revolutionized this industry, and has been the standard ever since. Still, we had people in Nevada that were in these casinos that had been there for many years, in some cases generations, or perhaps not in the casinos, but behind the casinos elsewhere. And it wasn't until I became governor in 1979, and we teamed up with the federal agencies, the FBI, who secured wiretaps. And that's when the cases really broke. And some in this room will remember that well, I'm sure. Richard Bunker was our chairman of our Gaming Control Board. And from those wiretaps, we ascertained that literally over half of the properties on the Las Vegas Strip were mobbed up. They were skimming. They were hidden owners that had never come forward for licenses. And we went after all of those licenses. In most instances, they voluntarily sold the properties. There were a couple of instances that had to go to court. But in the end, in 1 year, we were able to revoke all those licenses and license new people. We doubled the number of Gaming Control Board agents in the legislature that spring, and it enabled us to do what had to be done. And it turned the corner on taxes. It turned the corner on our reputation as an industry. At that point, up until then, only one other state had ventured into gaming at all. In 1977, New Jersey had come forward, and they came out and spent time here. I remember being with Governor Byrne, and we showed them how things were working in Nevada. But until that time, we were seen throughout the country and throughout the world as being mobbed up, and nothing that any other state was ever interested in. And we became the gold standard following that cleanup that we did for the whole world on how to regulate. I was invited to Europe. I gave papers over there on how we regulated. I've since visited casinos all over the world that have patterned their standards after Nevada and what we do. Which brings me to one suggestion I have for your whiteboard, which is let's look at the other states and see what the process is in each of those for the approval of new innovation. I mean, are they doing it in-house? Are they using independent labs entirely, or a combination? What is their typical time frame to get a new product out on the floor? And I think that they can provide a lot of ideas for us. We can learn from them. They learn from us a lot about licensing investigative techniques and what is what the whole concept of standards are for suitability. And we can learn from them now at this time on the innovation, because we have fallen behind. It's shocking to me when I think about what Mr. Akers said earlier concerning the fact that when taken into account in context of inflation, that we've actually declined from over the past over a decade, and it's shocking. The average Nevadan has no idea that proportionally the revenues are lower today than they were in 2006. It's stunning. Well, so we read in the newspaper, record revenues. It isn't. It's a record. It's a record low compared to what it once was. And there's a reason for that. And there's a lot of literature and a lot of studies have been done about the demographics of the players. And what that literature tells us is that the players are aging out. They're aging out is the way it's expressed in the literature. You can walk through a casino and the average person playing a slot machine is my age. They're not the young people. The young people play on their phone. They play. They're way ahead of their parents and their grandparents who are still playing the old-fashioned way, and they're bored. The young people are bored by the current products that are out there on the floor, and they're growing older, and the younger people are not coming in. And I know that's a generalization, but the studies are out there, and the articles are out there in the literature. You can read about it in industry magazines, and I have, and I can just say that I remember so well going through that difficult time when we cleaned the mob out. I was wearing a bulletproof vest. I had threats against my life. What a different day this is now. I mean, we changed the industry enormously in the 1970s. I've served in many capacities around the gaming industry. I've served on corporate boards. I was on the Venetian Las Vegas Sands board for many years. I did the development work for and was on the board of Boomtown company we also took public. I served on a national policy commission long ago, looking at and concluding that gaming regulation should be left to the individual states, not to the federal government, and they should get out. It was an important commission. It was a 3-year study. I was appointed by the president to that board. But today we see declining revenues. We see people aging out. We see bored young people. And I think that one thing that Mr. Akers said that makes a whole lot of sense to me is to let these companies during these test trial periods, field trials, to self-verify. I mean, we give someone like Mr. Akers, who's in the Gaming Hall of Fame, he's created products and sold companies in the past. We ought to be able to trust that company to make those tweaks without having to go through the time-consuming period of having to come back again to the lab for every tweak. He's not going to put his company's reputation and license on the line and do something wrong. He has more incentive to do the right thing than anybody in the whole picture. And I think that that's about trust. We have to trust our licensees. And I think finally, the bottom line on all this is that state of Nevada is highly dependent on tax revenue from the gaming industry. And the three of you, and coupled with the commission, are the ones that the state looks to maximize the opportunities that are there for tax revenue. It's no wonder that the governor drew attention to this matter, because it relates directly to state revenue and what they're able to do with fulfilling their responsibilities at the legislature, and he is governor to take care of the people in Nevada. It's important. And it filters down into the economy in every way. It creates, when there are more people and younger people coming in and new products in, it's more employees in the casinos. It's jobs for families at every level. And it'll help our economy begin boom in ways that we've neglected. And it's not to put blame on any single individual, but we're no longer the gold standard when it comes to innovation. We're following. And to me, it's a fairly simple thing to look at other states and how they're doing it and trusting the developers that are licensed and moving their products out, getting them on the floor and attracting younger people. So thank you to all three of you and for having this opportunity to come here today.
Thank you, Governor. Appreciate that. Very eloquent, and you're right. As far as the action items, us looking at other states, we're certainly not the only game in the country anymore. And as you said, a lot of states have looked to Nevada for the last 50 years, if you start back with New Jersey, and certainly over the last couple of decades. So if there's ways that we can learn how they're doing something here in the last 10 or 20 years, maybe Mr. Dorsey, we can ask your organization if maybe we can get some help on doing some research. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of lawyers in-house that we can do on that, but we'd be happy to work with AGM or NRA or anybody to see if we can kind of create a list of how their laboratory process is working. And if that allows us to speed things up, that's great. Always willing to learn from others.
Yeah, and the AG's office may be of assistance to you.
Absolutely.
In that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they're
Chief Caruso's always looking for something to do. So
I know.
We'll give them something to do.
But they do have communication, of course,
Yes.
among the states, among the regulators, and we can we usually learn more when we listen than when we speak.
Absolutely. That's what my dad always told me. You got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them in the right ratio.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Governor. Anybody else wishing to speak? Do we have, Madam Secretary, anybody in Carson City wishing to speak? I take that as a no. Either that or Madam Secretary fell asleep. I bored her. Yeah,
Sorry, I was having microphone issues. There's nobody here.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So I'll add up the governor's suggestion that we do a comparison of what Nevada's process is against other, and I'm going to call them regulated states that have kind of taken the Nevada model, foreign countries that have taken the Nevada model, and then how have they sped up the process of getting gaming equipment, gaming devices out on the floor faster. So we'll put that up there as an action item. I had Aristocrat had asked us to look at Reg 14.0802 regarding associated equipment and the new innovation beta process. So we'll add that to the regulation. And Chief Barbie, new innovation process, I believe, really applies to gaming equipment, gaming devices, but associated equipment. Do we have to go through a new innovation beta, or can we just speed things up without that specific process?
The new innovation beta was specific for gaming devices. This gave an opportunity to manufacturers to put a product out that might not be wholly regulatory compliant, but get real world feedback on how that product is operating, maybe make tweaks to it and both of the design while they're getting it regulatory compliant. But there were 2 litmus tests to that. It had to determine the outcome of the game correctly, and it had to pay the patron correctly. I'm sorry, it had to do all financial transactions correctly, and it had to determine the outcome of the game. So we were concerned about taxes and patron protection there. With associated equipment, we didn't implement the new innovation beta for associated equipment because typically associated equipment, that's its functionality, is to calculate revenue, and pay the patron correctly. That being said, though, applying the new innovation data process or potentially allowing associated equipment out on the floor is something that I don't believe requires a regulatory change. I believe that the associated equipment approval process allows the chair to authorize a field trial under the conditions that you may prescribe. I'd need to consult with the Attorney General's office, but that's something we could explore. It may not require a reg change. However, it would require potentially a change in our risk tolerance on how comfortable might the board be with allowing a product out without, demonstrating completely patron protection and the revenue accountability. So I think that that's something Aristocrat's suggestion is something we can wholly entertain.
Great. Thank you, Chief. And that's from Mark Hanks at Aristocrat. Are you here, Mr. Hanks? No? Okay. Well, we will make that part of the record and appreciate the Chief's comment on that. What else did I have on my notes here? That was most of what I had to the Chief's comment about putting things out on the floor. I want to say, me personally, I don't mind bending. We can't go to the point where we break, but regulatory over the past 5 decades, if it was written back in the 60s, 70s, maybe it's time that we swing the pendulum a little bit back the other way. Personally, as the chair, my approval process with the governor's direction is going to be leaning toward that. Again, effective regulation, not needing to mean slow regulation. So I'm all about that. At the same point, I do need to say that we can't just be putting things out in speed and allow it to go to the operators. And Chief Fremont, you may have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that if something got out there faster, everything's going to have glitches, right? But if it gets out there with too many glitches, when you do an audit, it's the operator who gets the regulatory violation, correct? Not the manufacturer. Yeah. So again, I'm not saying any of you are subject to regulatory violations, but we got to do everything we can to not let too much go out that ends up in the operator's lap. And I think you would all agree with that. So there's a balancing act somewhere in between there. Other board members, comments or questions?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I would like to begin by thanking you for convening this forum. It's very important, and it shows that we're thinking outside the box. This is extremely critical when there's a problem that's identified, especially by the governor in a State of the State address. I think we need to move on it, and you've done that. I look forward to working with the industry. I think there are some good suggestions here that have been brought up today. There's still probably some more work to do in this area. I'd like to thank Governor List. If it wasn't for the governor, I probably would never have made it to law school. And what I mean by that is back in 78, 79, I was working at the Tropicana, and you ran the mob out of that place. So I had to move across the street, learn craps. And I went to, I was a blackjack dealer there. Then I went to the Aladdin, and I was making a lot of money at the Aladdin back in 79, 80. And you clean that place out because that was a mob joint. And so then I knew someone who knew Mr. Shanker at the Dunes. I went over there for a few years, dealt craps, and you went after Mr. Shanker, and that was good. And that forced me to, actually, they pooled the tips with the blackjack and the craps. It was no longer a four-way split on the crap table. So my salary was basically cut in half. So at that point, I said, it's time to go to law school. So off I went, and here I am today. So, but seriously, I would like to maybe ask the Chief Barbie, do you have maybe one or two suggestions on how we can speed up the process on new products in particular?
Well, I think there were some good suggestions made today about collaborating perhaps a bit more with both the manufacturer and test labs during the process. Judge, I a quick comment on what the governor said, though, if I could put something out there. Our regulations and our requirements have developed over a period of time, and we intentionally have very strict requirements because of our past. And we're talking about the mob here and skimming and whatnot. So I think a lot of the requirements that we have today are still reflective of those. Yeah, and I don't mean to step on Chief Fremont's toes here from the accounting side of things or the auditing side of things, but there are a lot of our requirements that we get down into the weeds as far as statistical versus actual, metered versus actual, to ensure that there were no monies left off of the table in any way. So as we do an analysis of what potential changes we could make, and I would ask AGM or whomever is looking into, the process in other jurisdictions, maybe we look to what our requirements are in Nevada, and do we potentially still need all of the detailed reporting? Again, sorry, Chief Fremont, do we still need all of the detailed reporting and the various requirements that we have based on the environment that we're operating in today, and not necessarily based on the environment as it was in 1970 or 1980 when these requirements were there? My ultimate goal would be to reduce the requirements to as minimum as possible. It makes my life that much more easy. The fewer rules there are for us to enforce. So that would be one suggestion I would have on how we could potentially improve the process going forward. In addition to let's look at our process itself, let's also look at the requirements.
And by requirements, you mean regulations?
Well, regulations, control, internal control requirements, reporting requirements. Yes, look at it across the board, not just at the regulatory level, but also at the standards level.
I think that's a good point, Chief, is that we're not looking for a lot of work over here at the Gaming Control Board. And I'm pretty sure the technology division and lab isn't trying to do anything just to slow down the process. I'm sure you all believe that. So if there's ways we can figure this out, it's all good for us. It's just better because then it frees us up to do other things, which hopefully speeds up the government process in other areas as well. Which brings me to another point. I enjoy this. I hope it was valuable to you all to have a discussion, and this doesn't have to be the last one on this topic, but I'm also planning to do this in other divisions as well. Primarily, I want to go through investigations, and we may end up, Chiefs, the first time you're hearing this, we may end up going through each division with the idea of modernization being the key word. So if we don't have any other speakers, Member Watkins, you want to add something?
Yeah, sure. I'll add something. I just like to say that I appreciate the conversation here today. I appreciate seeing so many members of the industry willing to come and speak up. We're here to listen, and I appreciate the board members who are present today and the chiefs and their willingness to listen as well. I think some important things have come to light, especially as it relates to looking to other jurisdictions and the things that they've done, which which you noted. And I think the chair's suggestion to dig into this and to collaborate with regard to research to compare this jurisdiction and other jurisdictions is an important first step in getting on that pathway. And I look forward to the continued collaboration between the industry and the board.
Yeah, Judge.
If I could just add, on the break, I asked Mr. Akers if he could maybe compile a list of regulations or have your legal department that you feel might be antiquated or just redundant to another reg. And same thing with the NRSs. And Mr. Dorsey and Mr. Reeser, if you could do the same, I would appreciate it. I like to go through and eliminate as many regs and statutes as we can. I know with Ms. Rushton can back me up on this. I was with the NTA for about 11 years, and every time we got a new chairman, they wanted to add more regs. And every time there was a session at the legislature, more statutes. And a lot of them just overlapped, and it was completely unnecessary. Same thing on the bench. Every time you get some new statutes, new misdemeanors, and they're actually covered by another statute or regulation. So I would appreciate it if you gentlemen could do that, maybe submit to us, and we could all review it together and put it to a discussion and see with Chief Barbie as well, that we might be able to eliminate. I think that's one of the biggest problems I've heard from this discussion here today, to speed up the process. I think deregulating as much as we can without sacrificing safety and money laundering and so forth and so on, that would be very helpful. So that's all I have to say. Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, it's a good point. Reminded me, pursuant to the governor's executive order, we have to provide at least 10 regulations that we believe can be repealed. We'll be having a regulatory workshop on that next month, and that's across the entire Nevada Gaming Commission regulations, which is ultimately, of course, up to the Gaming Commission. But anybody who has suggestions on that, certainly come to that workshop as well. And I believe, Chief Barbie, did you tell me you're going through the technical standards with kind of the same kind of comb to look at that?
I am, and I've given this update to some of you in the past. Yes, the gaming device technical standards are under review. We have a final draft that's been available. It needs some tweaking internally. We have some internal processes to go through. The goal with those standards was to streamline and harmonize where we could. There was some modernization in there. I've mentioned to you before, we're going to look for additional RNG standards, bring those up a little bit. Unfortunately, we've had some hitches. I've used this term 3 times now. Some hitches in the get along. There was a pandemic. We've had some changes in priorities here internally, and I haven't been able to get those standards through the process, but I do expect those to pop here in the near future. Please don't ask me what that is. I'm just give it. It's in the near future. And then shortly behind that, we have tech standards for various types of associated equipment that are already queued up, but we get the biggest bang for our buck by modernizing the gaming device technical standards. So I'd like to focus on. So hopefully here in the near future, we'll see that.
Great. Is there other comments? Yeah, please. Afternoon.
Good afternoon. Jennifer Carlton, Chief Legal Officer for Sightline Payments, Chairman Hendrick, Member Watkins, Member Assad. I hadn't planned on saying anything either, although I did dress up more than my boss. So I'm very intrigued by this idea of using the beta testing for associated equipment because, of course, the NIB program has been in place since 2016. I'm not familiar with how many actual device manufacturers have taken advantage of the utilization of basically a mini field trial or abbreviated field trial, but for associated equipment. I think that would be a very welcome step. I'm curious where that would fit in the sort of current process we have with regard to outlining the program, putting together a white paper, going through that, where that NIB would actually fit in that program. I mean, obviously, this is all sort of coming up in sort of in real time, but if you had thoughts about that.
Personally, I don't. I think, Chief, how many manufacturers do you believe have taken advantage of the new innovation beta for gaming devices? Any idea?
I do. I would say as far as manufacturers go, maybe half a dozen or so. As far as products go, maybe we've seen up to 10 take advantage of the NIB program for gaming devices. Those manufacturers would tell you that of their success that they had with that, because it wasn't just getting a product to demonstrate its regulatory compliance. They were getting feedback on a particular feature, or one of the products had a price point they were adjusting, per gameplay to maximize, both point in as well as traction on the device. So there was a lot of good feedback on that. So I would say we've probably had maybe 10-ish products go through that new innovative beta process.
And if I understand what you were saying earlier, you don't think it's a reg change to start doing new innovation beta associated equipment. It could be something that your chair could approve under some program.
I do, and again, I want to caveat that with we would need to verify it with the Attorney General's office. I do think it's something that we could do now. It would fit into that approval process flow chart that we have. It would just be the field trial. One of the things I do want to point out about that approval process that you see the chart on that we issued back in 2015, that's not set in stone. That's an optimum path. You are not entitled, or you're not rather required to engage with us up until the point that you choose to submit a product. The part of the approval process is clearly defined. You submit it, it goes through trial, it gets approved. All of the pre-work that you do, that's up to you. We found that the best case scenarios have involved doing that work ahead of time to identify those potential hitches. But I would say, Jennifer, Ms. Carlton, the new innovation beta would go in with that field trial process. What we would need to look at is, right now, there's not a lot of discretion on a test lab's part on how they can certify a product. It needs to be, in their opinion, 100%. With new innovation beta, there's a certain amount of risk that has to be assessed and determined. Do we want to take that risk? We would need to figure that out, how we could do the two, combine the two to both extend a certain amount of risk, and how does the test lab play into that? But again, it's something we could.
I think you're right that we're all looking at this in real time, but certainly something we'd be willing to sit down and see. Does it fit? Does it speed things up?
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think I mentioned earlier, I'm certainly, as the chair, there's a lot of things that come across my desk as chair approval. I'm willing to bend. I can't break because I have a statutory duty to the state. But bending, to me, if we can speed up the highway, and you guys are going to have to be the guardrails. If this thing gets speed up and we start letting things out there, it's going to be incumbent upon licensees, which is the whole Nevada system, that you got to come back to us as the board and say, okay, you let this out there, we're going way too fast. So we're going to have to back off a little bit. But that's okay to me. If things are bending, that's fine. So I'm certainly open to that personally. This up here, the idea is this is to hold me accountable. So there's some action items that I have to be sure we look into, the entire board can look into, and I would ask the action items on you is that you stay in touch with us, you stay in touch with the technology division, and let's see if we can work on these. If it requires a reg workshop, we'll set that up. If it requires just another one of these meetings, open meetings, we'll do that. If it requires just to come on over and try to talk to me or the other board members, that's what we're here for. That's why the governor asked us to be here and try to make the state better. Anybody else? All right, Madam Chairman, Madam Secretary, I almost made you chair. Look at that, Nicole. Well, you can take over the next meeting. Madam Secretary, that brings us to the second public comment section, if you would, please.
This item is placed on the agenda to give the public an opportunity to comment on gaming-related matters. Anyone wishing to address the board may do so at this time. Comments by each person are limited to 3 minutes as a reasonable time, place, and manner restriction. If board members ask questions of the speaker, the time needed to address those questions will not count against the speaker's 3-minute time period. If speakers have any handouts or written copies of verbal comments to provide for the record, please hand them to the enforcement agent seated to your left in Las Vegas or behind you in Carson City.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Pursuant to state open meeting law, matters brought to the board's attention during this public comment section may not be acted upon by the board, but we're happy to hear comments from anyone. So if there is any public comment, let's go to Carson City. If there's any public comment, please step forward to the podium. I don't see anybody. And anybody here? I think we've talked enough, huh? All right, very good. That closes the public comment section. And that concludes this meeting with me saying thank you all for your time today. Appreciate it. Thank you all for coming and participating. Thank you.